Hey guys, welcome back to our March 31st video lecture. Today we're going to be talking about some of the landmark pieces of Franklin Delano Roosevelt's second New Deal. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. All right, the first topic we're going to be talking about today is really what, in essence, is a Bill of Rights for workers. FDR understood that when the Great Depression happened, many people were in the biggest predicaments because they had lost their job, right? When people lose their jobs, we need to have some sort of safety net that can catch them, right? And that's going to lead us to what's known as the Social Security Act. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to slide number 3. All right. Now, the Wagner Act guaranteed for workers the rights to self organization. In essence, this gave them the right to form what's known as a union. Now, to protect these rights, the Act founded what is known as the National Labor Relations Board, or NLRB, which had the power to supervise union elections and to ensure that they were free and democratic. In essence, that workers are being led by workers, that their collaboration is done in earnest on behalf of the workers and to protect the workers. The board could also penalize employers for unfair labor practices, such as attempting to discourage workers from unionizing, right? Or joining together, in other words. All right, moving on to slide number 4. Okay, so standards come to the workplace. Today, it's not even questioned when someone talks about a minimum wage or what is full-time work, right? A 40-hour work week. Well, this really hadn't been standardized up to this point, and the Free Labor Standards Act would make these things, as its name implies, standard. Now, the minimum wage at that time was set at 25 cents per hour. That's pretty small in comparison to today, but obviously because of inflation and other variables, 25% or 25 cents per hour is where that number was set at. Okay, and the maximum work week at that time was 44 hours. So a little less pay, a little more hours, but again, the concept is there. All right, things that we use every single day in our lives today, right? It comes about really in the second New Deal. Okay, it also looked out for things like child labor, right? Child labor wasn't going to take place anymore under the second part of the New Deal. All right, moving on to our next slide, slide number 5. Social Security comes to America. FDR would also address numerous long-term problems of the aged and unemployed. Obviously, when you get older and you can no longer work, that doesn't mean you no longer spend money. That doesn't mean that you no longer participate in the economy. Okay. If you become unemployed, it's the same situation. It doesn't mean you no longer participate in the economy, that you no longer have bills to pay. The Social Security Act is going to aim to really protect those two groups. This is what he said about it. I place the security of men, women, and children of the nation first. If you don't have a job to support yourself and your family, if you have become disabled and you cannot work any longer, as a society, we need to make sure we protect those people. FDR revealed his landmark Social Security Act in 1935. In June, it was passed by Congress, and by August, it was on the president's desk and signed. Social Security had become the law of the land. Okay, so moving on to slide number 6. Remember, at any time, guys, if you feel like pausing, that's fine. Okay, so protecting those who need protecting. The Social Security Act created a social insurance program to provide retirement and disability benefits. Retirement benefits, or cash payments, right? We know these as entitlements today. Went to retired workers sometime after the age of 62. Now, that age has been elevated a little bit today, naturally because people live longer, and that's really the reason why. Now, disability benefits are payments made to workers who have become too disabled to continue working, regardless of age. Now, severely disabled children are eligible for Social Security disability benefits as well. Right? Many Americans tap into those benefits even today. Right? That's what really tells us how important and how significant the Social Security Act was. Right? Not only at that time, but for millions and millions and millions of Americans to come. Okay, moving on to the next slide. Rising life expectancy and Social Security. A natural question that people, both Republicans and Democrats, have with Social Security today is, does the program need adjusting? Right? When it started, retirement age was typically around 62. A life expectancy in the 1930s was not much more than that. So, really, once you were able to tap into the program, it was meant to help support you in the last few years of life. As we have people living into their 70s, 80s, 90s year old, we have a program that was created with wonderful intentions, but is being overtaxed. Right? Too many people are tapping into the system and not enough people are paying into it. It leaves Social Security in an interesting place moving forward. Okay. So moving on to our next slide, slide 8. Unemployment insurance. The Social Security Act also established unemployment insurance programs for workers. Now, these programs have been in the news quite a bit lately because of the coronavirus. Unemployment insurance programs all over the country are coming into light, and people are actually looking at them and what benefits they provide. In the state of Florida, we actually have one of the lowest funded unemployment benefit programs. In fact, I believe it's something in the range of $275 a week. Now, with the most recent piece of legislation that was passed by Congress with the stimulus package, that's going to provide an additional $600 in benefit for those that are unemployed. That was really a great piece of legislation. It's amazing how much connection we have between what we're doing right now and the subject that we're talking about. It really is quite phenomenal. Okay, moving on to the next slide, slide number 9, the election of 1936. Well, in 1936, FDR secured a second term. And if you look at the electoral map, FDR didn't just win, it was a blue wave unlike anything we've ever seen, probably will ever see again. Really, presidents don't win elections in this sweeping fashion. Richard Nixon is going to have a lot of success. Of course, George Washington with his unanimous election. But really, when we look at electoral maps, regardless of the year, very, very rarely do we see maps that are so one way or the other. The country is generally pretty split. In 1936, though, you can see the entire country was all aboard the train for Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Right. Moving on to slide number 10. This breaks it down county by county. The darker the county is, the more they went that way. So the dark red that you can see in, say, upstate New York, that was very, very conservative. And then the dark blues, which you can see through the deep south, that would be overly democratic, right? Highly in support of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. So just another way to see how the country was feeling at that time. Obviously, the Democratic Party had complete control, not only of the White House, but of Capitol Hill as well. Okay, moving on to slide number 11. FDR attempts to pack the court. Well, we had talked about in our last lecture how FDR was struggling with the Supreme Court, how the Supreme Court was blocking much of his legislation. Well, in 1937, he actually presented an idea for how to get around that. He wanted to redesign the Supreme Court. Now, the bill called for appointing an additional justice for every sitting justice over the age of 70. Now, he claimed that this was because the court was too busy, that the justices were overworked. That is not at all what the true intention of that legislation was. The real intention was simple: pack the Supreme Court with overly liberal justices. So in essence, if the Democrats controlled not only the White House, not only Congress, but the Supreme Court as well, they could pass virtually whatever they wanted to pass. Now, Republicans and Democrats on both sides of this issue had grave reservations about the precedent this might set. Congress thankfully rejected the bill. This would have simply been a step too far for the executive. Now, the last question we're going to talk about today is, what is liberty, right? What does it mean to live in a state of liberty? In 1937, the Supreme Court would uphold both the Wagner Act and Social Security Act, right? Which leads to a redefining of exactly what liberty is. This is what the Chief Justice had to say about it. The protection of law against the evils which menace the health, safety, morals, and welfare of the people must at all times be protected. That is the government, or rather, that the government could promote liberty by using its power to ensure fair treatment of all Americans, right? So providing things like access to health care and education, making sure that we are providing for our people's safety, that we are providing for people's protection should they lose their jobs. So the definition of liberty expands. Not only is our government expanding at this time, but our definition of what basic human rights are is also expanding. Okay, so that brings us to a conclusion for today. You can go ahead and finish up your notes, and I look forward to seeing you back tomorrow for our Wednesday, April 1st video lecture. I hope you guys are safe. I hope you're well. I look forward to speaking with you soon.